In the bustling heart of New York City, Eleanor Hayes, a successful, independent 58-year-old widow, shocks her social circle by marrying a charismatic 25-year-old artist named Liam Sinclair. Their whirlwind romance captivates many, but beneath the surface, secrets lurk. Just 4 months after their lavish wedding, Liam disappears without a trace, leaving Eleanor shattered and desperate. As she embarks on a harrowing journey across continents, from New York's elite art world to London's shadowy underbelly, she uncovers a web of lies, betrayal, and dark secrets that challenge everything she thought she knew about love and trust. Before we dive into this gripping story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. And if you love stories packed with mystery and drama, don't forget to like this video and hit that subscribe button. There's so much more coming your way. The rain had begun quietly, a soft drizzle that blurred the city lights of Manhattan into glowing halos. By the time Eleanor Hayes arrived at the charity auction held in the opulent grand ballroom of the Plaza Hotel, the drizzle had turned into a steady downpour. She stood by the window, a glass of red wine in her hand, watching droplets race down the pane like tears on a weathered face. At 58, Eleanor was a striking figure. Her silver hair was cut in a stylish bob, framing a face that carried the wisdom of decades but still retained a sharp, confident glow. Tonight, her elegant emerald green gown shimmered beneath the crystal chandeliers, the silk fabric hugging her slender figure. She was used to commanding attention in these circles, successful art gallery owner, respected philanthropist, widow of a respected judge. But tonight, something felt different. The crowd buzzed with the usual pretense, chatter about stocks, art acquisitions, and social climbing, but Eleanor felt a strange tension in the air, like the calm before a storm. Her gaze shifted to the other side of the room, where a young man caught her eye. He was leaning against a marble column, watching the proceedings with an intensity that contrasted with the casual elegance around him. His tousled dark hair framed a face that was both handsome and enigmatic, like a character out of a novel Eleanor hadn't read yet. He wore a leather jacket, something entirely out of place among the tailored tuxedos and designer dresses. Curiosity pulled her closer. "Excuse me," she said, her voice steady but warm. "Are you here for the auction?" He turned toward her, revealing sharp green eyes that held a flicker of amusement. "Something like that," he replied, his voice deep and calm, like the undertow of a quiet river. "I'm Liam." "Eleanor," she responded, offering her hand. His grip was firm but gentle. "Are you an artist?" she asked, noticing the paint stains on his jeans. "A street artist," he said with a half-smile. "The city is my canvas." Eleanor's smile faltered slightly. Street art? In this setting? But there was something magnetic about him, an authenticity that made her pulse quicken. The rain intensified, rattling the windows like a distant drumbeat. A sudden flash of lightning lit the sky, followed by a sharp crack of thunder. The ballroom lights flickered, and for a brief moment, the room held its breath. Eleanor felt the storm's electric charge inside her, a spark she hadn't expected at her age. "Would you like to see my work?" Liam asked, gesturing toward the exit. Outside, the rain washed the city clean. Neon signs flickered through the mist, and the smell of wet asphalt and blooming jasmine from a nearby park mixed in the cool night air. Eleanor hesitated. The world she knew was safe, predictable, but something about Liam pulled her toward the unknown. "Lead the way," she said softly. They walked side by side through the slick streets of Manhattan, the cacophony of taxis and late-night pedestrians fading behind them. Liam stopped in front of a graffiti-covered brick wall beneath a flickering street lamp. With a sweep of his hand, he revealed a massive mural, vivid, chaotic, alive. Faces twisted in emotion, colors bleeding into one another like memories melting. "This is hope and despair," Liam said quietly. "I paint what most people try to hide." Eleanor felt a lump in her throat. The mural was raw, painful, and breathtaking all at once. It was a story she didn't know she was craving to hear. They stood in silence, the rain falling harder now, as the city seemed to pulse around them. For the first time in years, Eleanor felt seen, not for her wealth or her status, but for her hidden scars, her loneliness. Liam's hand brushed against hers, tentative but sure. "Sometimes," he said, "the most unexpected connections can change everything." The storm outside raged, but inside Eleanor, a fragile hope began to grow, a promise of a new beginning. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Eleanor's Manhattan penthouse, casting long, soft shadows across the minimalist decor. The city hummed quietly below, a distant symphony of car horns, footsteps, and the murmur of lives moving forward. But inside, Eleanor felt suspended in a rare moment of stillness. She sat by the window, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee, replaying the night before in her mind. Liam. The memory of his green eyes, the wild brush strokes on the wall, the way his hand had briefly touched hers, all lingered like a secret melody she couldn't forget. At 58, Eleanor was no stranger to solitude. 5 years had passed since the sudden death of her husband, Judge Richard Hayes. He had been her rock, her partner in a world that often felt cold and transactional. His absence had left a hollow ache, one that no amount of gallery openings or charity events could fill. Her friends called her brave, admired her resilience. But Eleanor knew the truth: she was lonely. And Liam, much younger, unpredictable, a force of raw energy, offered something she hadn't dared to hope for in years: a chance to feel alive again. Her phone buzzed on the marble table, breaking her reverie. "Eleanor, darling, are you coming to lunch today?" The voice was familiar. Claire, her oldest friend and confidant. "I'm not sure," Eleanor replied, her voice hesitant. "Something unexpected happened last night." Claire chuckled softly. "I don't suppose it involves a handsome young artist?" Eleanor smiled, despite herself. "Maybe." The afternoon sun warmed the rooftop garden of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where Eleanor and Claire met for lunch. The air was fragrant with blooming roses and freshly mown grass, a stark contrast to the concrete jungle below. "So tell me everything," Claire urged, slicing a strawberry tart with practiced grace. Eleanor hesitated, then recounted the story: the auction, the rain, Liam's art. Claire listened, her eyes wide with surprise. "You're serious about this, aren't you?" Eleanor nodded slowly. "I know it sounds reckless. The age difference, the whispers. But there's something about him, something I can't explain." Claire studied her friend closely. "You've been quiet lately. Maybe this is exactly what you need." That evening, Eleanor returned to the penthouse, the city lights glittering like a sea of stars beneath her. The apartment felt larger than usual, emptier. Yet her phone vibrated with a new message. "Meet me at the gallery tomorrow. I have something to show you." Liam. Curiosity and something deeper, hope, pushed Eleanor to say yes. The next day, Eleanor stepped into Liam's world, a converted warehouse in Brooklyn, walls adorned with vibrant murals and canvases that seemed to pulse with emotion. The scent of paint and turpentine mingled with the faint aroma of brewing coffee. Liam stood in the center, a smile playing on his lips. "This is where I create," he said, voice low and steady. Eleanor's eyes traced the bold strokes of a new piece, a haunting portrait of a woman whose eyes mirrored Eleanor's own pain and strength. "Who is she?" Eleanor whispered. "My mother," Liam replied. "She disappeared when I was a child." The revelation hung in the air like a question mark. Eleanor felt an unexpected kinship with this young man, both of them carrying ghosts. Days turned into weeks. Eleanor found herself drawn deeper into Liam's world and his mysteries. The city, with its relentless pace, seemed to slow around them. They shared quiet dinners in cozy bistros, late-night walks along the East River, and stolen moments in hidden corners of Central Park. But beneath the blossoming romance, shadows flickered. Liam was guarded about his past, often disappearing without explanation. Eleanor's friends grew uneasy, their whispered concerns growing louder. Yet Eleanor clung to the fragile hope that love, no matter how unlikely, might still bloom. The weeks that followed settled into an intoxicating rhythm. Eleanor's penthouse became a sanctuary of whispered conversations and shared silences, a fragile bubble amidst the relentless hum of New York City. But behind Liam's easy smile and quick wit, Eleanor sensed a tempest quietly gathering strength. One chilly October evening, the city wrapped in a misty haze, Eleanor found herself staring out at the skyline, the Empire State Building a beacon piercing the fog. Liam sat nearby, sketching absent-mindedly in a worn leather notebook. The flickering candlelight cast shadows on his face, highlighting the sharp angles and the vulnerability lurking beneath. "Liam," Eleanor began, her voice tentative, "you've told me about your mother, but what about your father?" He paused, eyes fixed on the page. "He's complicated. Not someone I talk about much." Eleanor leaned closer, sensing the weight behind his words. "You don't have to hide things from me." He sighed, closing the notebook with a slow, deliberate motion. "It's just, my family's past is messy. I've been trying to outrun it." Before Eleanor could press further, the sharp ring of her phone cut through the quiet. It was a message from Claire. "We need to talk. Now." Heart pounding, Eleanor excused herself and stepped into the hallway. Claire's face appeared on the screen, tense and urgent. Eleanor listened carefully. "I've been doing some digging about Liam." "What do you mean?" Eleanor's voice trembled. "He's not who he says he is. There are rumors, things about a missing person in Europe, about disappearances linked to someone matching his description." Eleanor's breath caught. "You're joking." "I'm serious. I don't want you to get hurt." That night, sleep eluded Eleanor. Shadows danced on the walls, and the silence of her apartment felt suffocating. She tried to piece together the fragments of Liam's story, his mother's disappearance, his evasiveness, Claire's warning. Was Liam running from something darker than she imagined? Or was she losing herself in a man who might never truly be hers? Determined to uncover the truth, Eleanor decided to visit the last place Liam had mentioned, an old European village where his mother had lived, according to him. If only to find answers and maybe some peace. The next morning, she booked a flight to Lisbon, Portugal, a city of cobbled streets, ancient secrets, and faded memories. The air was crisp and salty, filled with the distant hum of fado music and the clatter of trams on granite. Eleanor wandered through the narrow alleys of Alfama, the oldest district, where pastel-colored houses leaned close as if whispering to each other. At a small cafe, she showed Liam's photograph to the locals, her heart pounding with every shake of a head. One elderly woman, her face etched with lines like a map of stories, finally nodded slowly. "I remember," she said in broken English. "A woman, young, disappeared many years ago. Left her son behind." Eleanor's pulse quickened. She was closer now, closer to the heart of the mystery and to Liam's past. Back in New York, Liam sat alone in his studio, the rain tapping a mournful rhythm against the windows. He stared at a faded photograph of a woman, his mother, her eyes haunting and filled with secrets. 4 months had passed since Eleanor and Liam met. Their whirlwind romance had captivated the media and stirred gossip, but now the unspoken shadows of his past threatened to unravel everything. Liam's phone buzzed with a message, 3 simple words: "I'm gone. Goodbye." And just like that, he vanished. The morning sunlight filtered weakly through the heavy drapes of Eleanor's penthouse, but she barely noticed. Her world had narrowed down to one question: where was Liam? The message haunted her, those 3 chilling words blinking on her phone screen: "I'm gone. Goodbye." No explanation. No hint. Just silence after. Her hands trembled as she stared at the text again, rereading it for some hidden meaning. But there was none. She tried calling him, no answer. Texts, emails, social media, all met with deafening silence. Her heart a storm of confusion and fear, Eleanor paced the vast living room, the ticking of the antique clock the only sound in the heavy stillness. What could have driven Liam away? Had he vanished because of his past? Was he in danger? Or was this some cruel game, a test she had unknowingly failed? Memories of their last conversation flickered in her mind. The quiet sadness in his eyes when he spoke of his mother, the elusive shadows in his voice when asked about his father. The news media had begun to catch wind of the story. The mystery of the May-December couple, they called it, the 58-year-old successful widow and her enigmatic 25-year-old lover who disappeared without a trace. Reporters camped outside her building, flashing cameras and whispered questions, but Eleanor remained composed, a steel edge beneath her elegant facade. She needed answers, and she would find them. Her first step was to contact Liam's closest friends, if any existed. But the young man had lived on the fringes. Few people knew him well, and those who did were tight-lipped. One name kept coming up: Marco, a graffiti artist and rumored member of a street art collective in Brooklyn. Tracking Marco down took days. A narrow, graffiti-tagged studio in Williamsburg, tucked behind a maze of industrial warehouses. When Eleanor knocked, a tall, wiry man with piercing eyes answered. He hesitated, then let her in. "I'm looking for Liam," Eleanor said, voice steady but urgent. "He disappeared 4 days ago. I need to know what happened." Marco's face darkened. "You don't want to get involved in that. Liam was in trouble, dangerous trouble." "Please," Eleanor insisted. "Anything you can tell me." Marco sighed. Liam had enemies, people who wanted to silence him. There's something about his past, something big. He got mixed up with the wrong crowd. Eleanor's mind raced. The charming young artist, the enigmatic past, the sudden disappearance. It all pointed to something deeper, darker than she had imagined. Her resolve hardened. She would follow Liam's trail, no matter where it led, through the streets of New York, across oceans to Europe, into the shadows of secrets buried long ago. Because some promises, especially those made in love, were worth chasing, even into the darkest night. The city's gray morning fog clung to Eleanor's coat as she stepped out onto the bustling streets of Brooklyn, her breath visible in the crisp autumn air. Each step toward Liam's last known haunt felt heavier, charged with an uneasy mix of hope and dread. The studio Marco had led her to was tucked between a decaying brick warehouse and a shuttered bakery, its graffiti-tagged door hanging slightly ajar like an invitation into another world, one Eleanor had only glimpsed through Liam's stories but had never dared enter herself. Inside, the air smelled of spray paint and stale cigarettes. The walls pulsed with murals, vivid portraits and swirling colors that seemed to whisper secrets only the city could understand. Marco appeared from the shadows, his face more guarded now. Liam was chasing something, he said quietly. A lead on his mother's disappearance. Something no one else was willing to touch. Eleanor's heart quickened. What did he find? Marco glanced over his shoulder, then leaned in closer. There's a name, Viktor Vassiliev. A man with ties in Europe. Dangerous ties. Liam believed Viktor had something to do with his mother vanishing. The name felt like a knife twisting inside Eleanor's chest. "Why didn't he tell me?" she asked, voice cracking. "Because he didn't want to put you in danger," Marco replied grimly. Back at her penthouse, Eleanor sat surrounded by papers and photographs, maps of Lisbon, faded Polaroids of a young woman, and a worn journal Liam had left behind. She traced her finger over the name Viktor Vassiliev, feeling the cold weight of history pressing down. Who was this man? Why had Liam's life become a dangerous game of secrets and shadows? That night, Eleanor stared out at the Manhattan skyline, the city alive but distant, a glittering facade masking the dark truths she was uncovering. Her phone buzzed. A message, no sender. "Stop digging, Eleanor. Some stones are better left unturned." The warning sent a shiver down her spine. Determined, Eleanor knew this was no ordinary disappearance. Liam's vanishing was tied to something far more sinister, a web of deception stretching from New York to the winding streets of Lisbon, and perhaps beyond. She was no longer just searching for a man she loved. She was stepping into a world where every truth held a danger, and every question deepened the mystery. The next morning, Eleanor's flight to Lisbon was already booked. The city promised history, secrets, and the faint scent of the ocean mingling with the old stone walls of Alfama's winding alleys. She arrived just as the sun began its slow climb, casting golden light over terracotta rooftops and weathered facades. Lisbon was a city caught between time. Ancient trams rattled past centuries-old cathedrals, and pastel-colored houses leaned into each other like old friends sharing whispers. Eleanor moved through the streets with purpose, clutching Liam's faded journal. She followed his cryptic notes, half in English, half in Portuguese, piecing together fragments of his mother's last days. At a small, dimly lit bookstore tucked away on Rua de Madalena, An elderly man with a thick beard and kind eyes listened intently as Eleanor showed him Liam's photograph. "Ah, Liam," he said slowly, tracing the name with a gnarled finger. "A troubled young man. His mother, she was known here once, before the shadows took her." Eleanor pressed for more, but the man only shook his head. "Some stories are whispered, not spoken aloud." That evening, the city's narrow streets twisted into the growing dark, the air thick with the scent of salt and smoke from nearby cafes. Eleanor found herself in a small cafe where a local journalist named Sophia agreed to meet her. Sophia's eyes were sharp, her demeanor cautious but curious. "You're looking for Viktor Vassiliev," Sophia said quietly over steaming cups of espresso. "How do you know that name?" Eleanor asked. Sophia leaned forward. "Victor's been a ghost in Lisbon for years. Rumors say he's connected to disappearances, to underground networks that operate in the shadows between Europe and America." Eleanor's pulse quickened. "Do you think he's involved with Liam's mother's disappearance?" Sophia nodded. "It's possible. But be careful. Victor doesn't like questions." Later, Eleanor walked alone along the Tagus River, the moonlight shimmering on the water like a fragile promise. Her thoughts swirled: Liam's disappearance, the chilling message she received, and the dangerous man whose name was now etched into her fate. Somewhere beneath Lisbon's ancient stones, the truth waited, and Eleanor was ready to uncover it, no matter the cost. The air in Lisbon grew colder as Eleanor walked the labyrinthine streets toward a nondescript building Sophia had pointed out, a faded warehouse near the docks that seemed more forgotten than abandoned. The salty breeze from the Tagus River whispered through the cracked windows, carrying a faint, eerie chill. Inside, shadows stretched long and dark, wrapping around piles of crates and rusty machinery. Eleanor's heart pounded in her chest, every creak of the floorboards making her flinch. Suddenly, footsteps echoed behind her. She spun around, but no one was there. "Liam?" she whispered into the emptiness. No answer. Her phone vibrated with an unknown number. "Leave Lisbon. Victor watches. Your next step could be your last." Fear mixed with determination surged through her veins. Eleanor was no stranger to danger, but this was unlike anything she'd ever faced. She pressed on. Days later, Eleanor met with a former associate of Victor's, a wiry man named Raoul, who spoke in hushed tones from a shadowed cafe corner. "Victor controls more than you know," Raoul said. "Human trafficking, money laundering, disappearances. Liam's mother got caught in his web. Liam tried to expose him. That's why he vanished." Eleanor clenched her fists. "Where is Liam now?" Raoul shook his head. "No one knows. But he's alive, for now." The city's beauty seemed to mock Eleanor's growing dread. The pastel walls and cobbled streets hid secrets darker than night. As she left the cafe, a black sedan idled nearby, its windows tinted like the eyes of a predator. Her every step felt watched. Back at her hotel, Eleanor found a small package slipped under her door. Inside, a worn locket that had belonged to Liam's mother, engraved with a single word: hope. Tears welled up, but so did her resolve. The hunt was far from over, and the shadows were closing in. Eleanor sat by the hotel window, the locket resting heavily in her palm, its cold metal a stark contrast to the fire burning inside her. She carefully opened it, revealing a faded photograph of a young woman, Liam's mother, with eyes that seemed to hold 1,000 untold stories. Pinned behind the photo was a tiny, folded note. With trembling fingers, Eleanor unfolded the fragile paper. "Find me where the river meets the sea. Trust no one." The message was cryptic, but Eleanor knew exactly what it meant. Lisbon's riverside, where the Tagus met the Atlantic, was vast and riddled with hidden docks and forgotten warehouses, a perfect place to hide secrets. Determined, she navigated the narrow streets toward the docks at twilight. The salty air mixed with a faint scent of diesel and old wood as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and fiery oranges. The docks were eerily quiet, save for the creak of ropes and the distant call of seagulls settling for the night. Eleanor's footsteps echoed against the wooden planks as she followed her instincts, searching for any sign of Liam or the shadows that pursued him. A faint glint caught her eye, a small, weathered notebook tucked beneath a pile of fishing nets. She picked it up carefully. The cover was embossed with initials, LV. Inside, pages filled with hurried handwriting revealed fragmented thoughts and names, mentions of Viktor Vasiliev, cryptic warnings, and a map marking a remote village in Portugal's rugged north. Her phone buzzed again. Stop now or lose everything. The message was chilling, but Eleanor's resolve only grew stronger. That night, as the city's lights twinkled below, Eleanor locked the locket around her neck. It was no longer just a piece of jewelry, it was a beacon guiding her through the darkness. She was no longer just a woman searching for a missing lover. She was a force rising against the shadows, and the story was far from over. The next morning, Eleanor boarded a train bound for the rugged north of Portugal, the landscape outside the window shifting from the urban buzz of Lisbon to rolling hills draped in mist and ancient forests. The rhythm of the tracks beneath her was a steady heartbeat, a fragile tether to hope. Liam's notebook lay open on her lap, the hastily drawn map marking a place called Vila das Sombras, the village of shadows. The name sent a chill through her. As the train slowed, Eleanor glimpsed stone cottages crowned with slate roofs, the streets quiet under the gray sky. The village felt frozen in time, isolated, secretive. She checked into a small inn run by a weathered woman with wary eyes and a cautious smile. "You're not the first to ask about Liam Vasiliev," the innkeeper said softly. "But be careful. This place hides more than just old stories." That night, the wind whispered through the narrow alleys, carrying the scent of pine and earth. Eleanor lay awake, the shadows seeming to stretch and pulse with unseen life outside her window. The following day, she sought out locals who remembered Liam's mother, a woman who had vanished without a trace years before. A quiet man named Tomas, tending a small garden of herbs and wildflowers, offered a chilling piece of the puzzle. "She was different," Tomas said, voice low. "Not like us." People whispered she was running from something or someone. Eleanor's fingers tightened around the locket. "And Victor?" she asked. Tomas's eyes darkened. "A man who owns this village in many ways. Feared, respected, and dangerous." That evening, Eleanor wandered to the edge of the village, where dense woods hugged the cliffs overlooking the roaring Atlantic. There, half hidden beneath tangled vines, she discovered an old, crumbling chapel, the place marked in Liam's notes. Inside, the cold stone walls bore scratches and symbols, messages scrawled in desperation, warnings to stay away. A sudden noise behind her made her spin around, heart pounding. A shadow moved in the doorway. "Looking for answers, Mrs. Carter?" A voice drawled, low, dangerous. Eleanor's breath caught as Viktor Vasiliev stepped into the fading light, his eyes cold as the ocean below. Eleanor's breath hitched as Victor's silhouette filled the doorway, the last rays of the sun casting long shadows across the chapel's cracked stone floor. His tall frame seemed to swallow the fragile light, his dark eyes sharp and unreadable. "So, the city lady finally finds her way to Vila das Sombras," Victor said, voice low, edged with a cold amusement. "Did Liam send you? Or was it curiosity?" Eleanor squared her shoulders despite the tremor inside. "I'm here for the truth, about Liam and about his mother." Victor's lips curled into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Truth is a dangerous thing. Sometimes it's better left buried. The air thickened as Eleanor studied him, the man who held the key to a past shrouded in mystery and pain. She felt 1,000 questions burning behind her eyes. Why did Liam disappear? What happened to his mother? She demanded. Victor took a step closer, the scent of earth and smoke clinging to him. Liam's mother was no innocent. She was tangled in webs of lies and debts that stretched far beyond this village. When she tried to break free, she disappeared, willingly or not. Eleanor's heart clenched. And Liam? Why vanish without a word? A dangerous game he played, Victor said, voice barely above a whisper. He was chasing ghosts, and now, so are you. Suddenly, the chapel doors slammed open behind Eleanor, and the cold wind howled through the broken windows, swirling dust and shadows. Victor's eyes flicked to the entrance, his expression darkening. Be careful, Eleanor. You're walking a razor's edge. Before she could respond, Victor vanished into the thickening twilight, leaving Eleanor alone with the echo of his words and the rising storm outside. She stood in the silence, the weight of the moment pressing down. The truth was closer than ever, but so was the danger. Outside the crumbling chapel, rain began to fall in cold, heavy sheets, drumming against the ancient stones like a warning. Eleanor stood rooted in place, the wind tugging at her coat, the weight of Victor's words settling deep in her bones. She pulled the locket from around her neck, clutching it tight, the only tangible connection to Liam and his lost mother. The village seemed to hold its breath, the trees whispering secrets no one dared speak aloud. Back at the inn, the warmth of the hearth did little to thaw Eleanor's restless thoughts. Her fingers traced the edges of Liam's notebook, trying to piece together the fragments of a life shattered by lies, fear, and shadows. Why had Liam disappeared? Was he a victim, or had he chosen this path? Her mind raced, torn between hope and despair. A sudden knock at the door startled her. It was Tomas, the quiet gardener from the village. "I have something you should see," he said, eyes grave. In his hands was an old, weathered envelope, sealed with wax and marked with unfamiliar symbols. Inside, Eleanor found a series of letters, correspondence between Liam's mother and a mysterious figure warning of betrayal and danger. One letter ended with a chilling line, "Trust no one. The shadows are closer than you think." The storm outside raged on, mirroring the turmoil within Eleanor's heart. She knew the path ahead would be treacherous, filled with secrets, lies, and impossible choices. But she would not turn back. Liam's disappearance was not just a mystery. It was a call to battle. The morning fog rolled thick over Vila das Sombras, swallowing the village in a ghostly embrace. Eleanor stepped outside the inn, the damp chill seeping through her coat as she clutched the envelope of letters tightly. The world seemed muted, colors dulled, sounds muffled, like the village itself was holding its breath, waiting.